Hey, it's Lemon. Welcome to the Backlogs. As I'm sure a good number of you are aware, I like Dark Souls. I mean, really like Dark Souls. Really, so it should be no surprise that, whenever someone shows any interest in playing it, I actively promote the game, and will give an entire rundown of the lore, mechanics, and impact it's had on gaming as a whole to whoever will listen. And I'm not alone. This flawed masterpiece has captured the hearts and minds of millions of people around the world. Type the words Dark Souls into your search bar and you'll be bombarded with thousands of hours of content, ranging from PvP matches, to walkthroughs, to lore videos, to video essays about how Dark Souls teaches its players coping skills, and can possibly assist them in truly challenging times in their lives. But take note of the title I just gave it, for it is indeed just that, flawed. And while I can gush for hours about all the great things this game has to offer, and there are many, I'd be lying if I pretended that there's nothing wrong with it. Because Dark Souls 1 is, if we're being honest with ourselves, hot garbage. Wait, hold on, let me finish. Look, I love Dark Souls 1. Hell, I love the Prepare to Die edition. You know, the ugly, slightly more clunky one. It's my most played game on Steam by a long shot, and is the comfort food I always return to whenever I'm feeling overwhelmed by my game library, which is often. But whenever a new player asks me if they should play it, I always feel like I have to add an asterisk to my recommendation. Because despite the joy and immense satisfaction I feel every time I see this title screen, not everyone will feel this way. Hell, I actively hated this game my first go around, and for good reason. So, with that in mind, we need to talk about Dark Souls 1. First things first, a little context. Dark Souls originally came out in 2011, then 2012 for PC. It was praised for being immersive, difficult, and incredibly important to gaming as a whole. So, being the good gamer that I am, a slightly younger Lemon picked up Dark Souls on PC and began the journey into Lordran. And I got as far as the Capra Demon before putting down my controller in frustration and uninstalling the game. Then, approximately 8 months later, I picked it up again. Why? Because someone made a video. Someone whose storytelling skills and research are unmatched when it comes to FromSoft deep dives. I'm of course talking about Terramantis. Don't get me wrong, I watched my fair share of VaatiVidya like everyone else, but Terramantis just spoke to me. The storytelling, the cinematography, all of it dripping with atmosphere and weight. And it was clear to me that he wasn't making fan fiction. The story of Paladin Leroy and his fall into despair in the Tomb of Giants was real. It was a thing in the game, and I needed to see it for myself. So with Terramantis' words echoing in my ears, I began again, and again, and again. Each time getting a little farther, each time getting a little closer to my goals. And eventually, for reasons I still don't understand myself, everything just clicked. And so, the spiral of madness that is my Dark Souls obsession began. But that's a story for another time, because it's the first half of that story that truly matters. Dark Souls, for all of its beauty, has some of the least intuitive and hateful game design I've ever seen. And while I don't think it's intentional, considering they improved upon this problem with each iteration of the series, it is a serious problem for anyone who decides to pick it up for themselves. So, let's get into it. First things first, we need to make a character. There's a lot going on here, and very little explaining it. There's plenty of customization options, all of which don't matter gameplay-wise, but there are several important decisions you'll be making. The first decision that matters is your class. They all have different gear, different stats, and different strengths. None of this will be told to you. And while yes, every character can be molded into whatever build you desire, the starting equipment can sometimes make or break your first experience. Then there's the gifts, which are also given little to no explanation. Is the goddess's blessing good? Like, will healing be hard to come by? What's an STD bomb? And what are humanities? Also, why is there an item in here that has literally no effect, followed immediately by an item that is so overpowered that every player picks it? And suddenly, we get a great example of the problem we're going to be bumping into throughout the entire game. Key information, no pun intended, is technically told to you, but not in a way that's clear or understandable. Take the Master Key description, for example. Initial equip for the thief. Shouldn't this information be, in the previous tab? Like, on the screen that shows the thief's starting equipment? But no, the only way you'd even know is by reading it here. Which means yes, the thief is the only class that can start with 2 gifts. There's also the argument that having the Master Key as a new player is extremely problematic, since you'll continuously sequence break the normal flow of the game and find yourself in difficult areas at a low level. But we've got enough problems to talk about as it is. Then there's the stats. Their nomenclature isn't nearly as obtuse as later games, but why can't I get an explanation of what they do? Is endurance good? Is resistance? Why is humanity popping up again, and why do I have 0 of it? Guess we'll pick the Wanderer. They seem cool. And so begins the lore. And whoo, baby, are you slapped over the head with it. There's dragons, great lords, furtive pygmies, and all sorts of wild cutscenes playing behind it all. And as with any game that thrives on vague lore, it all seems pretty nonsensical if you're just starting out. And it'll probably stay that way unless you plunge down the rabbit hole of Dark Souls lore videos, or avidly read every item description you can find. But more on that later. So, here we are, Dark Souls 1. It seems simple enough at first. Read the messages on the floor, learn how to play. Tutorial 101 stuff. But then you arrive at the first boss arena. Big Booty Boppin' drops down from above, the messages tell us to get away, and so we do just that. We take our broken weapon, pressing all the buttons the game has told us to use, and what is that damage? Is that supposed to happen? Is this what the reviews meant by hard? Well, no. Turns out there's a nice little door to your left that opens up, and you could be forgiven for not noticing it, considering a demon the size of the screen just fell on top of you. Is this the worst thing ever? No. But it's another bit of frustration added to the pile, and we're only 5 minutes into the game. Not a great start. Moving forward, we begin to find all of our starting equipment we were promised. Excellent, let's get that shield equipped. What is all this? Okay, wrong screen, I guess. Ah, there we go. This looks a little more correct. We slap the shield into our left hand, then move forward. And would you look at that, we've got a sword now. Guess I'll put this in my second weapon slot. I know the broken sword sucks, but I can replace that later. And congratulations, you've just doomed your character to a slow, fat-rolling death. Because something the game makes no mention of, as far as I can tell, is how every piece of equipment you throw on has a weight, and how the more weight you add, the more clunky and awful your movement becomes. Why is there no message for this? Why do I have to willfully toggle the status pages, then find the equip load section amongst all of these overwhelming numbers, just to understand that weight is being accounted for? And why will the game never tell you that there are specific points in your carry weight that changes the way you move? Speaking of overwhelming numbers, let's take a look at the sword itself. What am I looking at here? Is 80 good? I mean, these are probably damage types, but what the hell are these two? Maybe if I press toggle again. Oh, good, even more numbers. At least here we can see what the symbols meant, but now we've got more questions. Like, what do param bonuses do? What are rec params? What are these numbers? What are these symbols now? And why are some of them 0 and others a dash? Now, here's the thing. Some of you are probably rolling your eyes right about now. After all, rec params obviously means required parameters, which means your stats. And the red splotchy thing is clearly bleed damage. But humor me for a moment. Did you know that when you first started this game? And more importantly, have you played years and years of RPGs or video games in general before you played Dark Souls? Because judging by the way all this information is being presented, Dark Souls assumes you have. And if you haven't, then all of this here is extremely overwhelming. And overwhelming a player in the literal tutorial is never good. Moving right along, eyes glazed over from the menu fatigue, we head on up these stairs and receive the Dark Souls special. Get used to that. Then we find our first NPC. He's got a lot to say, with very little of it making sense, but he does give us a healing flask and a vague mission to find a bell. Good enough for now. And then there's the fog wall. Simultaneously intimidating and intriguing, this is just one example of how Dark Souls' art design draws you in. Zero complaints, love everything about this. We then get to drop on Big Booty Boppin', which feels amazing, and then we get to see our new damage taking effect, which feels better still. And so begins the dopamine drip, that thing that Dark Souls does so well. You feel stronger, your confidence is bolstered, and the game gives you very clear evidence that yes, you have in fact improved. Very few games do this as well as Dark Souls, and it's why so many of us are willing to subject ourselves to the numerous brick walls this game throws our way for hours on end. We get more lore, arrive in Lordran proper, and more unexplained mechanics. The hell is kindling? And what is this humanity thing the game keeps going on about? Should I use it? Oh, okay, here's kindling. Guess I'll do that. Oh, I can't do that while hollow. The hell does that mean? Reverse it, I guess? What do you mean no humanity? I just picked up 5. So yeah, unless you're super diligent about pressing all the buttons and using all the items, something that so many players refuse to do out of fear of needing them later, you'll never know that you can use humanity to increase this number up here. And if you have a number up there, you then get the prompt that you can turn human again. But what did that do? I mean, yeah, I'm not beef jerky anymore, and my numbers are glowing now, but what else? Who knows? And we won't ever know, because the game never tells you how it works or that it's required for co-op and PvP, and everybody shut up, I hear a bell. Oh, thank God, something to go off of. That night guy said something about a bell, but now this depressed looking guy is telling me that there are 2 bells. Great, cool. Even the simple instructions I received earlier are getting complicated. Well, the bell sounds like it's coming from over here, and this does look like a church. Seems logical enough, right? Nope, wrong. Enjoy your quick and painful death. And it's right about here where everyone starts to disagree with one another and the player base divides into two groups. One group states that Dark Souls is unfair, generally obtuse, and unfriendly to new players in a way that almost feels like it doesn't want you to play it. Meanwhile, the other group states that this is on purpose, that Dark Souls does give you all the information you need to play it, and that it's trying to subtly push you to explore and learn and try new things until something works. And technically, this is not untrue. Dark Souls does provide you with all the information you could possibly want. Spreadsheets and spreadsheets of this stuff. And, through sheer necessity, does in fact require its players to constantly adapt and explore to progress. But it's the methodology here that's the problem. It's this expectation that a player will explore every option, press every button, and read every item description that turns away new players so quickly. Because while Dark Souls will happily let you read its spreadsheets, it holds the explanation of those sheets close to its chest. For example, in the level up screen, we are finally given an explanation button, which, mercy of mercies, actually gives a short but concise description of what every stat does, shows that stats are in fact referring to the previously mentioned parameters, and tells us what all those mysterious numbers mean. But if we aren't leveling up, there's no way to see what the finer details of our equipment mean. Oh, wait, yes there is. It's the same button I had to press to get explanations for my stats at the bonfire. So why doesn't Dark Souls tell me this is an option? And this isn't the first time Dark Souls does something like this. Take the bow and arrow, for example. If you play as the hunter, it's part of your starting equipment, and as such, the game gives you a nice little message telling you how to use it, how to zoom, all that jazz. But play as any other character, and that message simply doesn't exist. The same is true of the cleric and the sorcerer classes as well. Play as those characters and you'll learn how to use your spell tool of choice. Play as anyone else, and you're left to your own devices, frantically pressing buttons and struggling through trial and error until you figure out how it works. Look, I'm totally on board for learning as you go. I don't need my handheld. 17 pages of tutorial text and unskippable visual demonstrations are not the way to go. But a quick rundown of the basic game mechanics would have been nice. Or maybe even a menu tab that has all the tutorial information you need, but only if you go looking for it. Dark Souls only told me what the buttons do, and even on that front they failed. Just, come on man, you gotta give me something here. But okay, we've harped on long enough about the new player experience. Needless to say, it's rough. But let's pretend you're like the rest of the player base, and you've either looked up all the missing information, or forced your way through those first few hours. Now the game gets better, right? Well, yes, but also no. First off, the controls are a bit stiff. The first thing you'll learn is how the game makes you devote yourself to your button presses. No animation canceling for you. If you press attack, you're gonna attack, and you're gonna sit through that entire animation, which is, strangely enough, a good thing. It adds weight to the combat, makes you focus on every fight you have, and really pulls you into the game. But then there's that weird choice that, when locked on, you can only roll in the 4 cardinal directions. But if you're not locked on, you can roll in any direction you press. I don't know why they did that, and it's probably why a majority of veteran players will play without the lock-on. There's also other parts of combat that are just unexplained to you, like how holding a weapon two-handed means you only need a portion of the actual strength requirement, how two-handing a weapon gives you more damage and makes it so you don't bounce off of enemy shields, or how a whole bunch of weapons have their own unique movesets that just ignore the rules entirely. Like the scimitar replacing your kick, which is extremely useful against fighting shielded enemies, with low damage flare. And again, I'm not saying that these are bad things on their own. In fact, they're all great ideas. But the problem is that Dark Souls actively decided it doesn't want to tell you about those great ideas, which makes putting all those ideas together feel clunky and unintuitive until you fully understand what's happening. Which becomes a problem when you bump into some of the more poorly designed combat encounters in the game. You've got such classics as the Anor Londo archers, the bone wheels in the catacombs, and the howls in the beginning of the game, especially the ones with the torches. Okay, what the hell was that? And that's just the regular enemies. The bosses are their own problem. Well, some of them anyway. To exemplify this, let's talk about the boss that made me rage quit the game the first time I attempted to play it. The Capra Demon. His arena is small, he has 2 dogs with him that take up even more of the arena real estate and cause bleed damage, and more often than not, he's already primed and ready to pounce before you even finish crossing the fog wall. Now, I've heard arguments that this boss is supposed to teach the player the importance of using a shield. But if that's the case, why can't I block his leap attack? I can block the Taurus demon's attack with a shield no problem. How the heck is this thing smashing me into the dirt? Well, the answer is stability. Turns out each shield has a stability score, and if it's high enough, you can, in fact, block the attack. But if you stuck to the main path, didn't take the master key, and got unlucky with your RNG drops, the best shield stability you can possibly achieve by this point is 58, which isn't enough to actually block the attack. But you can block the attack if you two-hand your shield, which can only be done by putting it in your right hand. Is this a solution? Yes. Is it a good solution? Not really. And is it clear to the player that this is even an option? Clear as mud, maybe. And what if I'm not playing as a strength-based character? What if I'm a dirty dex main and I just want to dual wield and parry my way through the game? Well, I hope you like the run up to the boss fog, because those dogs are going to trap you against the level geometry several times before you get lucky and dodge past. Now, there is another option. You can upgrade your shield, which in turn increases its stability. And with enough upgrades, you can get the shield to the point where it can withstand an attack. Probably. But this brings us, segue, to the upgrade system. I'm not sure who thought this was an acceptable way of doing things, but holy hell, what is all this? You've got upgrades, downgrades, modifications, and boss weapon transmutations, all of which are not explained. Good luck, have fun. But don't worry, the community has come up with this handy graph to help you out. Thank God they somewhat simplified things in Dark Souls 2 and 3, can we be honest? So the combat system is a bit unintuitive. But hey, the lore is good, right? Oh yeah, it's good. But the game doesn't want to give it to you for free. You gotta find it on your own. And while it does feel amazing when you suddenly realize how all of the item descriptions you've been scrutinizing suddenly come together to form a complete picture of the greater world, you can very easily lose huge chunks of lore if you make the wrong choices in your playthrough. I'm talking, of course, about the NPCs. Anyone who's played this game before knows exactly what I'm talking about. You're going about your day, just doing your thing, when all of a sudden you find yourself talking to some weirdo in a church. Is he aggressive? Why is he posturing on you like that? And what the hell is with that laugh? So you stab him, because every part of your brain is telling you that this man will backstab you the first chance he gets. Well done, good job team. Except then you realize that this NPC is actually a priest, never betrays you, and is actually in charge of forgiving your sins when you do this exact same thing to other NPCs. Thank you, Dark Souls. It's an interesting choice, if I'm being honest. You're constantly on guard, expecting an attack around every corner, and then you've got these passively intimidating NPCs who do nothing to dissuade you from your initial instinct to strike first and ask questions later. But if you do that, then you'll lose entire quest lines, entire paragraphs of lore, and even items or spells that you can't get anywhere else. And then your paranoia is justified when multiple NPCs do backstab you and try to kill you. Or worse yet, kill each other. Why? Why are you like this? And you know what? I'm on board for this. This feeling of uncertainty and fear is a perfect addition to the world feel that Dark Souls is going for. Now, if only it wasn't so finicky. If you don't have a step-by-step guide within immediate reach, I guarantee that you'll goof up at least one quest line, but probably more like all of them. They're just a bit too vague, and because of how easy it is to sequence break the game by accident, chances are you'll go somewhere you weren't supposed to be yet and end up hollowing several NPCs by proxy. And if you want to talk vague, don't even get me started on how to access the DLC. Here, let's go over the steps. Tell me when I lose you. Kill the Hydra, go to the random pool behind it, quit the game, then reload it to find a new crystal golem. Save the pretty lady inside it, then go to the Duke's Archives to kill another crystal golem to get a pendant, but only after you've gotten the Lord Vessel. Then go back to where the pretty lady was and touch a giant portal to another timeline. Did you get all that? What do you mean I lost you at the Hydra? Why didn't you stop me from talking? But yeah, whatever hero figured out how to unlock this DLC, you have my respect. You're a more patient player than I am, and that's saying something. Oh boy, okay, what else is there? I mean, there's a couple sections in the game that are just kind of unfair to new players, like Sen's Fortress's hidden bonfire, getting stuck in the Duke's Archives or the Painted World, or the trap bonfire in the Ash Lake or the Catacombs if you don't have the warp ability yet. And there's the Covenants, which are never explained to the player whatsoever, so, you know. Look, we could go on, but I think you get the point. Dark Souls 1 has some of the least friendly new player design I've seen in a modern video game. It's almost as if the game is daring you to quit. Go ahead. Do it. Fail. Just like everyone before you. But then, you don't. You stick with it. You force yourself forward. You beat down the challenge in front of you, then the next. Then the next. And when you get stuck, you ask for help. Either from those who've struggled before you and have graciously imparted their knowledge, or in the form of another player by your side. And you win. And it feels amazing. And then, madly, you go back. You dive headfirst back into the game with all the knowledge you've gained. And you destroy it. Areas that took hours now take minutes. You cut through the bosses you struggled with previously like a hot knife through butter. And the lore, once cryptic, now rings with a depth that you never knew existed in this form of media. It's beautiful. It's a masterpiece. And it's flawed. But that's okay. We love Dark Souls 1 not in spite of its flaws. but because of them. The struggle you endured, the hardships you faced, all of these things make the sudden clarity that much sweeter. But not everyone will see these things. Some people will bounce off, never to return. Some will point out these flaws in anger as they do. And that's okay. They're right, after all. And all we can do is hope that one day, they'll try again. They'll come back with new knowledge, or a friend who's willing to share the burden, and maybe, just maybe, they'll see what you see. And the flame will burn on. So, there you have it. Dark Souls 1, a flawed masterpiece that started a genre. Would I recommend it? Yes. But I also highly recommend you understand what you're getting into beforehand. And remember, if you need help, reach out. We're all in this together after all, and neither of us wants to see you go hollow. If you like this style of deep analysis on what does and doesn't work in video games, maybe leave a like or a comment down below. Lord knows we're fighting my usual algorithm with this type of content, so doing that really helps get the point across both to me and YouTube that I should make more videos like this. On that note, just know that I plan to give this same treatment to some of the more beloved games out there. Games like Hollow Knight, Elden Ring, The Last of Us, just to name a few. I'm hoping that by tearing down my favorite game of all time, that you'll allow me a little leeway when I talk about your favorite game later down the line. Because nothing is above critique, and I personally think there's a value in putting the flaws of the things we love in the foreground. Hiding the problems just makes them so much greater when they come to light. And besides, if we don't learn from our gaming history, future games are doomed to repeat it. Over and over and over again. So on that note, feel free to discuss your experiences down below, whether it's about Dark Souls or any other game that comes to mind. Don't worry, we're all adults here. On the internet. Oh god, this is gonna go badly, isn't it?